And he said, listen, Damron, he said, I was wondering if you might be interested in working on special duty. And I said, yes, sir. I said, that's interesting. That might be something to think about for the future. And he said, well, he said, listen, he said, it's good work. He said, it's a good group of men. He said, I think you'd fit right in. I think you'd be very comfortable with that group of men. And he said, if you're interested in it, he says, I can get you transferred into a special duty. And I said, yes, sir. I said, that's great. That'd be nice. I'd appreciate that. And he said, good. He said, I'm in charge of special duties. He said, I'm going to be transferred into that unit. And I said, okay, sir, thank you. And I'm walking away, and I'm going through the tunnel under the street out to get my car for the night and relieve the guy that's been working that shift. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell is special duty? I'd never heard of it. I'd never heard anybody mention it. And I'm thinking, why didn't I say something to him? You know, what is it? Or what hours do you work? What sort of work is it? Stuff. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want to prolong a conversation. I didn't even want anyone to see me talking to him. When I was talking to him there, I was kind of looking around, hoping that no one even saw me talking to this guy. So I'm walking out, and I'm wondering to myself, what the hell is special duty? So I get out to the guy I'm relieving. He was a funny cracker. His name was Denny. And I love Denny, good-looking man, and bright, funny. And Denny always had a quick retort to anything I might throw at him. So I'm walking up to Denny that night, and I said, hey, you fucking street whore, how's it going? And he looks at me and he says, yeah, Damron. He said, I'll think about you tonight, too, while I'm fucking my wife and you're patting down joints that have pissed on himself. And I look at Denny and I said, you're going to think about me while you're fucking your wife? Really, Denny? He said, yeah. He said, I probably didn't say that right. I said, no, that's all right, Denny. I like you. I love you, Denny. I love you, man. And, you know, he said, yeah, right, Damron. And he's walking away. And I said, hey, Denny, by the way, I said, what the hell is special duty? And he says, I don't know, never heard of it. I said, come on, don't blow me off. What is it? You know what it is. He said, never heard of it. So he leaves. Over the next couple of days, I asked some other guys about special duty, and nobody has heard of it. Nobody knows what it is. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe I misheard, I didn't hear it right, or something, or maybe it's something you shouldn't talk about it. So I don't want to say anything to anybody else or let them know I might be interested in this special duty thing. But I do ask Ron Danielson, my friend. Ron and I lived in the same building. He was up on the 3rd floor. I had an apartment on the 1st floor. And so I asked Ron, would you find out for me what special duty is? He says, yeah, I'll check it out. So we were regular drinking buddies by this time. Ron comes back to me in a couple of days, and he says, you know, he said, that's kind of interesting. He said, it's not vice, but it is undercover. And he said, there's about 16, 18, 20 guys, and what they do is they saturate a certain area where some sort of a crime is being repeated. And they blanket that area until they figure out the MO, find out who's doing it, tag these guys, catch them in the act, and eliminate the crime series. He said they have a very high success rate. He said, and it's interesting, he said, I understand they're a real tight group of guys. He said, they're real close, they really watch out for each other and back each other up. He said, it's a pretty tight group of men. He said, I think the whole thing, he said, there's a guy, lieutenant, it's a Greek name, Karajosis or something, in charge of it. Have you ever met him? I go, no, I've never met him. I think, maybe I heard the name one time, but no, I don't know who it is. I never heard it. He said, well, you know, it might be good work. So sure as hell, a few nights later, in my box, I get a note that says you've been transferred to special duty. Report next Wednesday night at 8 o'clock in the evening. So that next Wednesday night, I go into the locker room. The Oakland PD locker room has, there's over 500 guys on the department. They all have lockers in that room. It's a big room. Usually it's hustle, bustle, noisy. A bunch of guys are going off shift, guys are coming on shift, guys are showering. You hear the banging of lockers, guys are laughing and carrying on. It's very busy. But this night, when I walk in at 8 o'clock, shift change has already occurred, and it's pretty much empty. But as I walk down the aisles, I notice a couple of guys, but I don't know who they are. I've never seen them. And I get to my locker, and I'm doing some things in my locker, and this guy comes down the row, and he introduces himself, and he says, you must be the new guy. And yeah, that's me. I'm the new guy stuff. He said, listen, he said, Wednesday night, this is the 3rd Wednesday of the month. He said, we have a judo class. So he said, go to the towel room, check out a towel, and get one of those karate outfits called a gi. He said, and we wear the gi for the karate class in the gym. And I'm saying, oh, yeah, all right, cool. So I go and I get the gi, and I'm coming back, and I'm looking down the aisles, and I see a couple of these guys putting on those white cotton shorts. They're kind of knee length, and they're kind of thin, and they just have like a drawstring. And I'm looking at these guys who are getting dressed, and I notice nobody's putting on a jockstrap or underwear. And so I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, this is cool. So we go commando for this judo class thing. So I put on the shorts. I've got my jacket thrown over my shoulder. It's kind of almost like a house robe. It's kind of thick and just has a sash that you tie it around your waist and stuff like that to hold it together. So I've got mine thrown over the shoulder because I've seen the other guys doing this. And I walk into the gym, and I'm looking around at these guys and stuff, and I'm thinking, good-looking group of chess. So the guy comes up to me, who's the sergeant, and he introduces himself, and he introduces me to the group. And he says, I want you guys to welcome Damron. I've heard a lot of good things about him. He said, I think he's going to fit in with the group. He said, you know, get to know him, make him feel at home, and make him feel comfortable with the group. And I thank him and stuff like that. And then the karate instruction starts. The karate instructor is an FBI agent who has a black belt in karate, my dick hangs low, I don't know, some sort of Japanese thing. And basically what he does is he demonstrates something. He says, okay, a guy comes at you with a haymaker, and you grab his arm, you throw him off weight, you use his balance, you throw him down, you flip him up in the air, you slap the sides of his head with your hands, and that rusts his eardrums, and you ram your fingers up his nose, split his nostrils apart, hit him in the throat, break his collarbone, punch him in the chest, maybe you can rupture his spleen that way, throw him down on the ground, knee drop him, break as many of his ribs as you can, turn him over, handcuff the fucking bastard, and arrest him. He said, now get a partner and practice that a couple of times so you feel comfortable. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I always feel comfortable when somebody's trying to rip my nostrils apart, break my collarbone and throw me down and break all my ribs and stuff like that. Yeah, the sergeant comes up to me, Sergeant Ed Lasky. He says, come on, Damron, let's buddy up. Okay, Sergeant. So Sergeant and I start going through these maneuvers. The sergeant has his own way of interpreting these different maneuvers. Okay, he grabs me, he pulls my robe open, he flips me up in the air, I come down, all of a sudden his crotch is in my face, his crotch is in, or his face is in my crotch, he's coming up my chest. Did he just bite my fucking nipple? Yes, he did. And he's coming up my chest, and he's slobbering on me, oh, he spins me over, I'm laying there pinned on the mat, saying, give, Ed, you got me, give. You give, Damron, you give. Yeah, Ed, you got me, give. So we're going through this. Okay, here I go again. I'm up in the air, I'm coming down, he's on top of me, he's slobbering, his dick is in my face. All of a sudden he's coming up my chest, he's slobbering all over me, he's spinning me over, I'm laying there, give. Excuse me a second. Is that his stiff dick pressed against the cheeks of my ass? Yes, I think it is. And I'm laying there and I'm thinking to myself, why don't you just pull down my pants, pull out your dick, and butt fuck me right here on this mat in front of these other guys, because that's just about what the fuck you're doing. So I flip over there, and I'm laying there, my robe is open, I'm looking up at the sergeant, he's already got his robe off, his stiffy is making a tent out of the front of those cotton shorts, and he holds down his hand, says, give me your hand, Damron. I put up my hand, jerks me up, wraps his arms around me, gives me a big bear hug, kisses me on the neck, and says, good fucking workout, Damron. I go, oh yeah, Ed. I've been thinking to myself, I'm having a flashback. Remember Lieutenant Lewis and the warning about the big muscular queer that could throw me up against the wall and beat the shit out of me? This is the big muscular queer. But he didn't tell me that the queer was going to be my sergeant and he was going to butt fuck me in the gym in front of 20 other men. Okay, you guys, that's it. Let's hit the showers. We've got 10, 15 minutes. Each in line up, and we're going to go from there. Good workout, you guys. What happened that night in that shower is in the book. If you read it, you may think it's funny. I did not. I thought it was disturbing, upsetting. I was a little bit pissed. And I did not ever look forward to wanting to shower with those guys again. But it's in the book. Okay. Not everything in the book is, it's not a boner book. Everything in it is not funny. There's a lot of stuff in the book that is dead serious. But I tried to put things in there that you've never read before, never seen before on TV. There were a couple of chapters in that book that were very difficult for me to write because of the emotional content. in the book. I was very, very fortunate. I got started writing my book because I knew a woman named Barbara Parker, who's a mystery writer in Florida. Barbara has written 16 books, many of which have been made into movies and films. Barbara and I used to talk all the time. She loved my stories and actually used some of the things I told her in some of her own books and stuff. But she always told me, Will, you got to write your own book. And I said, yeah, Barbara, you know, someday I will. Well, when I finally did start writing my book, I was dead serious about it. I worked every morning from early in the morning until like 1 or 2 in the afternoon when I'd stop to eat, go to the gym. And I would send away the material each day to Barbara. In 8 months, I wrote over 900 pages. Barbara at that time stopped and she said, Will, that's enough. She said, we've got more than enough material for our first book, second book, third book. She said, so we're going to start editing it down. Well, I had these 2 chapters in particular that I knew were going to be very difficult for me to write emotionally. One of the chapters is called The Silver Fox. I wrote it in a single setting. I sat there, I typed it all out. When I was done with that chapter, my heart was beating. I was crying. And I sent it away to Barbara. The second chapter that was very, very difficult for me is called John Fry. John Fry was a young John Fry was a young cop, 23 years old. He'd been on the department a year and a half. Very good looking guy. Married, had a 3-year-old daughter. John Fry and I worked on beat 3 together, the roughest beat in Oakland, California. Whenever John got a call, I showed up to cover his ass. If ever I got a call, I knew that John would be pulling up to the curb behind me to cover me. One night I'd been taking a report on a stolen auto, and when I came out from taking that report, on the air I hear a code 3, officer needs assistance. That's red light and siren. That you're going to go to that scene as quickly as you possibly can to render assistance. As I was going to the scene, I heard sirens, I saw other red lights flashing through intersections. I get to the scene and this isn't usually that hard for me. I walk up, John is laying on the sidewalk, dead. He's got 3 bullets in him, and he's laying there in a pool of his own blood. Another officer had been shot also, an officer named Haynes. He had been shot 3 times also, but we got him to the hospital and Haynes did live. But needless to say, that was a very upsetting experience for me. John Fry had been shot by Huey Newton, the head of the Hells Angels. Now, a lot of times when I talk to guys about that time in history and stuff, and I say, you know, do you know the name of Huey Newton, the Hells Angels? And people go, oh yeah, I remember that name. I remember that stuff. And I always say, do you know the name of the young cop he killed? Nobody does. His name was John Fry. So, when I finished writing that chapter, I hit the send button, and it went away to Barbara. Barbara called me the next day. Now, usually I never talk to Barbara about the work. The few times I had talked to her, I said, Barbara, can you give me any ideas on how I'm doing, you know, character or point of reference or, you know, any writing techniques? And she always just said, Will, write the book just the way you talk. She said, the way you talk is great. She said, just tell the story. And I said, okay. But the morning after I sent her that chapter, she calls. And this is Barbara. And I said, yeah. She said, I just read John Fry. I said, yeah. And she said, my heart was pounding. She said, I couldn't breathe. And I'm sitting here crying. I said, yeah. I said, I know. She said, Will, I want to tell you, you are a writer. And that compliment meant more to me than probably any other compliment I've ever received in my life. It really meant a lot to me. By the way, in the editing of that book, those 2 chapters, The Silver Fox and John Fry, not a word in either one of those chapters was ever changed from the morning that I sat there and I wrote them out. Gentlemen, I've had the opportunity to speak to different groups over the last year. I spoke to one group one day, and I knew that it was a group of about 80 men, and I knew out of that group that about 15 of them had read the book because it had been advertised in advance. And when I finished talking to the group and everything, I asked the guys, I said, you know, if you've read my book, could you raise your hand and let me know about how many guys in here have read the book? And about 15 guys raised their hands. And I said, would you guys do me a favor and stand up for a minute? And those 15 guys stood up in the room. And I said, first of all, let me tell you, those are the best 15 looking men in this room. And then I said, gentlemen, I said, I want to ask you a question if I could. I said, when you were reading that book, if you had some sort of a strong emotional connection with the material that you're reading, maybe you had to put the book down for a minute, take a breath, maybe even cry. I said, if you had that strong emotional connection when you were reading that book, would you do me a favor and remain standing for a minute? And all 15 of the guys in the room were still standing. I said, let me ask you something else. I said, if when you were reading that book, you read something and it was humorous, you kind of chuckled, maybe you laughed out loud at something that you were reading. If you got a big kick out of something in the book and you laughed out loud, would you do me a favor and remain standing for just one more minute? And all those guys were still standing in that room. I said, let me ask you one more question. You're reading the book and something starts to happen physically down between your legs. Okay, you get a hard on while you're reading the book. I said, if you got a hard on while you're reading the book, would you do me a favor and sit down? And they all sat down. Except for this one little guy who's there in the middle of the room, and he's still standing there holding onto the sides of his walker. He's got a big smile on his face, and he puts up his hand. And I said, yeah, what happened? He said, well, I would have gotten a hard on, but I hadn't taken my Cialis. And everybody laughed, and he sat down. Gentlemen, if there's one thing I wish for the guys who have read my book, or the guys who are thinking about reading it, if you find a book that you emotionally connect with because of the material, that gives you a laugh and gives you a boner, that's probably a pretty good book. And that's what I wish for all the guys who have read my book or who might read my book in the future. I do have some of my books here. I sell them for $22. That's what they allow me to sell it for because it's also on Amazon. And Amazon discounts it also. I think they sell it for $24. So anyways, I do have some of the books. It's also available on an ebook, iBook, if you like to read your books that way. Once again, I wanted to thank all the guys in Prime Timers here in Las Vegas who put this conference together for you guys. They've done a lot of work, and I'm thankful to them this morning to have the opportunity to be here and talk to you. Something I think we should all think about in the future. I think this would be a great city for a national or international convention of prime timers. So as you're here for the rest of the week, think about that. It's an exciting place to be, and I hope you guys have a lot of fun the rest of the time you're here. Do I have time to answer any questions? If there's any questions?
You sure do.
Anybody have a question that they wanted to ask me about?
What drove you from the police department?
Well, that thing with John Fry upset me a lot. I thought I'm not going to give my life for the city of Oakland, California. After that, I joined the fire department. And I stayed on the fire department in Contra Costa County for the next 18 years. My time on the police department carried over, and I retired from the fire department. I had sex with a lot of policemen. I'll admit it. I didn't think I was gay. I thought I just like to fuck with my buddies. But I'll tell you, I had a hell of a lot more sex on the fire department. Those guys were fun. But anyways, yeah, that's why I left and I went to the fire department.
I grew up in Hayward about the same time frame as you did.
Oh, geez.
And my friends, my classmates and stuff that ended up in the police department said that what drove them, mostly from the police department, was not the Hells Angels, not the Black Panthers, it was PCP. Did you see that?
It was just starting to come in.
Yeah.
It was just starting to come in. It was getting very, very dangerous. There have been a lot of programs done about Oakland, California. I think it was just last year that 6 cops in Oakland in one day were killed.
Yeah.
Oakland was a tough town. Oakland right now is down something like over 200 officers. They just put through a recruit class and they're trying to up that number. But it was a rough town then. It is still a rough town. Yeah, I can agree with
that drug at all.
What?
There's no logic to that drug at all.
No. And the guys that were dealing in that sort of thing were becoming more and more heavily armed and everything. It was a wild town, wild-ass town. Yes?
I'm wondering if you're going to have a new book out about firemen.
About the fire department?
Flame out.
What are you thinking? I get asked that question all the time. And actually, I've never thought of doing a book about the fire department. It was interesting. There were a lot of funny characters. There was some good sex. But mostly it was 24 hours a day sitting around in a firehouse watching sports events on television. So yeah, I've thought about it. One of the things about the police department, it's been long enough for me now that, first of all, I did change the names of the characters in the book, except for a couple of people that are in the public domain. For example, Ronald Reagan is in the book. I guarded Ronald Reagan one day. Wasn't that an interesting experience? He spoke at a fundraising convention at the Kaiser Center in Oakland, California, and I sat with him, ate lunch with him, and guarded him one day. His name is in the book. Huey Newton is in the book. Eldridge Cleaver, the head of the Hells Angels, Sonny Barger. I actually arrested Sonny Barger's wife one night on Christmas Eve, believe it or not. Yeah, I knew him. I don't know how many of you remember a folk singer at the time, Joan Baez. Okay, I arrested Joan. I arrested Joan, and she actually went to prison for 8 months for that crime. I have since, by the way, met her, and I told her the story and my perspective and stuff like that. She got up, she gave me a big hug and a kiss, and she said, "I want to thank you for telling me." And so, yeah. But there are names like that are in the book. The name Ron Danielson is one of the actual names of the real character. I would love to meet Ron again sometime, and that's why I left his name in the book, and there's certainly nothing derogatory about him in the book. A lot of the other guys that I talk about in the book, on the Oakland Police Department, a lot of guys had nicknames. And I worked with a guy that I think assigned every nickname on the Oakland Police Department. So a lot of the guys, when I talk about them, I refer to them by nickname. There's a guy named Millimeter, Fuck Buddy. I mean, there's all these different names. And so I use the nicknames a lot. But it's been long enough on the Oakland Police Department that a lot of, I mean, all those guys are retired. And probably, because I was so young at the time, probably a lot of them are dead. Whereas the fire department is more recent, and if I were to write about that at this time, more guys would be able to put two and two together. So I've refrained from doing that. But I do have more than enough material to write a couple more books about the police department if I decide to do that. So, any other questions?
Do you take papers?
No, I don't have the facility to take your credit. Okay. So, it's also available on Amazon or your ebook. But if anybody wants me to sign a copy today, to yourself or to a friend or something like that, might be a nice souvenir from the conference. But once again, I want to thank Pete and a lot of the other guys that have put this conference together for us. I really consider it a privilege to be here this morning and talk to you. And you've been a great audience. And I want to thank you very, very much. Thank you.